Hey, Waste No Day fans, before we get started with today's amazing episode, I just wanted to say that Nate's audio is a little rough. It's one more thing we were trying to do as we were transitioning over to me being several states away from Nate instead of us recording together in the studio and only the guest being remote. But the content that Dustin Seaton brought was so good. I couldn't part with the episode, so we decided to air it anyway. I know what you're thinking. If it's just Nate's audio, why didn't you just cut him out completely? I get it. First of all, how dare you talk about my co-host like that? Second off, Nate asked most of the questions as usual while I'm either sound asleep or texting, so it wouldn't be much of an episode without him. So if the audio is a little rough for you and you got to skip this one, I get it. It won't be like that next week, but I can say that it's well worth the rough sounding audio with Nate sounding like he's recording from a cast iron bathtub, because Dustin really, really brings some good content. So thank you for your patience again, and enjoy the episode.
One thing I usually don't lack is confidence, if anybody knows me. And it does, if there is a place in that, I guess it would be communication, but a lot of it's just the uncomfort of starting that conversation. So, and that's what I had to figure out, and I knew I could always do that. There's a way that I was taught, and we call it the form method.
Welcome to the Waste No Day podcast, a podcast specifically for and about the home services industry as it relates to plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical. More than a podcast, Waste No Day is a credo, a determination, a mindset. It is a never-ending discipline. It is a refuse to lose pursuit. It is a wake-up call every morning to waste no day. Now here's your hosts, Brian Burton and Nate Minnick.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Waste No Day podcast. Your hosts, Nate and Brian, hanging out with you one more time and looking forward to a great guest and subject today. We have Dustin Seaton joining us. He is out of Mr. Sparky Mid-America, and he's going to be talking to us about the uncomfortable subject of growth through discomfort. It's going to be a great show and hopefully a little bit of a challenge to us. But for right now, Brian and I are going to spend just a little bit of time breaking down that subject for yourself. And we're going to turn to Brian for our quote.
In life, we don't get what we want. We get what we deserve. Earl Nightingale.
All right. Okay. I'm with you there, Brian. Nice one.
Yeah, I used that quote in a training I did this morning, and really kind of broke it down. So the online etymology dictionary says that the word deserve, because we get what we deserve in life, not what we want. The classical Latin sense evolved from to be entitled to because of good service, to be worthy of because of good service. D meaning duh in Latin, which was from or completely, and then servire meaning literally serve, so from service. So what you deserve versus what you want. If you're serving customers on a daily basis, be it on the phone, from the truck, from a leadership role, training and helping the field service staff, you are serving people for a living. And if you're in sales, how do you make more commission? You figure out how to serve more people. You find a product or service that benefits people, and you get them to buy it. It's that simple.
And our subject today is going to be one that is pretty close to home because it's so easy for us to just kick back and relax and sometimes stay in that mode a little too long. You can call it coasting, you can call it drifting, you can call it whatever you want to. But we have a natural tendency to choose easy things, right? And so that's something that our guest is going to wage against on this show. And it's going to be a great time bucking against the trend of complacency and focusing on growth through discomfort. But for right now, it is time for our review of the week. Brian, who are we highlighting today?
Love this. 5 stars. Love listening to this podcast. It's such an encouraging and inspiring podcast, and it really helps my day-to-day life. Wasting no day is such an important way to live. Joni Absolute 2665. That could be a female tech. Joni? No, what if it's not now? Joni. If that's Johnny, my bad, Jay. But if it's a female tech, hey, we don't get a whole lot of reviews from you, so we appreciate you. That's awesome.
That sure is awesome. And of course, if you would like to leave a review for us, that'd be super cool, and we'd really appreciate it, especially if it's a 5-star one. We always love hearing from you. For right now, though, it's time for you to hear from us, and specifically our guest, as we put Dustin Seaton in your passenger seat. Our guest today is Dustin Seaton. He is the Director of Operations at Mr. Sparky Mid-America. With over 15 years of experience in the field, he began his career in new construction as an electrician and transitioned into service technician 6 years ago. His dedication has led him to become the operations manager and progressing through roles like regional manager and regional general manager. Today, he is proud to hold the position of Director of Operations, overseeing excellence in every aspect of his electrical services business. Welcome to the show, Dustin.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, welcome, buddy. It's good to have you, 1, on the show, 2, sitting 4 feet away from me.
I know. It's good. It's hot out here.
Yeah, it's pretty hot. Dustin's in Phoenix this week,
Yeah.
handling some business at the Phoenix Mr. Sparky. I showed up because I don't have a whole lot going on right here this moment. So
You've been laying down some good training.
yeah, showed up, spent some time with his techs, as we talked about a little bit last week, and got to get to know some really cool electricians out here. So it's been a good time. This is my second time getting to hang out with Dustin. Always have a good time doing that. And, so we chat from time to time. We text from time to time and just give each other a little bit of a push.
Well, we are looking forward to a good show, Dustin, and I'm sure you're going to have some good stuff to bring. We're talking about growth through discomfort today. And, there's a lot of different ways that we could take that topic. But I'm excited to jump into it. But first, we always like to hear a little bit about the history of our guest. What's your story? Where'd you come from? How'd you get into the trades? And what are you doing now, man?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I started basically during high school as an electrician, new construction electrician that was. Just roping houses. My brother was an electrician. So I, of course, had to go to work on spring break, summer breaks, Christmas breaks, different things like that to get money. So during my high school career, I was doing electric work with my brother and different things like that. So once I graduated high school, I went to work at the company that he was currently working for as an apprentice. I got my journeyman's license there in the state of Oklahoma at around 20 years old. And then my brother started his own company, and I went there and helped him work. Still new construction, roping houses, so a lot different from what we do here in the Sparky world for sure. And at that point, I worked there for probably about another 8 years or so. So I was probably 10 years into the trade when I made the switch over to Mr. Sparky. And man, I feel like we've all been there at some point. You kind of run into a wall at that company, and it's just kind of as far and as big as that mom and pop show that wants to go. And I wanted a little bit more. I wanted to make sure that I could find a way to provide for the family. Had a wonderful little baby girl coming along, so just needed to step my career up, I guess you will. So applied at a job here at Mr. Sparky in Oklahoma City. Got hired on. Honestly, had no idea what I was getting myself into. I've done, from spec homes, thousands of spec homes, big custom homes, no problem. I knew this was a service company. Honestly, the only reason I took the job was because I got a company take-home vehicle. And that was because I had the job.
Jackpot.
I had a company. Yeah, that was all I was looking for. I had a couple other offers. This is the one that gave me a company take-home vehicle day one. So that's honestly what landed me here.
They're doing things a little bit differently in Oklahoma City than they are here in Phoenix, aren't they?
Yeah.
Everybody gets a vehicle.
Everyone, it was like Oprah for a little bit.
Whatever it takes, like talent comes through the door.
Yeah.
And you're not getting them because you make them bring their vehicle back to the shop? Like, for real? How serious are you about growing your business?
It's an easy win.
It really is.
I mean, it really is an easy win. And so, like I said, I was working for my brother, so I did have a company truck, and I didn't feel like I wanted to add that expense onto my continued expense. So I got this, and I still remember sitting in the interview, like, just nervous. I wasn't afraid of my abilities as an electrician. I've been an electrician for a long time, problem solved, did service calls, but if you're in the new construction business, you understand what it is like to do a service call, right? It's go there, fix whatever it is. Don't worry about anything else that may need to be taken care of. Don't even look at it. You ain't worried about making the home safer.
You got 11 more calls to run today, so don't you dare gaze toward any other electric.
I wasn't even 11 more calls. I had to go back and finish that house so I could go home for the day. You know what I mean? I got to go home when that house was finished.
Even better.
And yeah, so absolutely. So I remember sitting there in the interview and just, knowing that it was all just service work and different things like that. And I was like, what the heck? Let's take a chance. Seems like a great company. Interview went really well. So started, that was in January 1 of 2018 was my actual first day on the job. So the day after New Year's was when I started in Oklahoma City. And then just worked there for that year, kind of somehow throughout that year, just kind of what I felt kind of became the leader of that shop. And January 1 of 2019, I became regional manager. I became operations manager over the Oklahoma City office and ran that shop. And then about halfway through 2019, I would say, became a regional manager over Oklahoma City and Tulsa as well, while I was still in the truck running calls, doing service work.
Love that.
All of the above at the
stuff.
time. Yeah. So that was a fun year. And then, from there we basically moved on. We opened a Phoenix location. Then I became regional general manager over that. Finally got my what is it? What's in it for you? FM.
Yeah. Favorite radio station.
That's right.
WII
And it was to get me out of a truck. And so once I went to regional general manager, got me out of a truck, and then did that for probably the last 4 years or so, and then over a couple new locations as we started up new startups, and then this year 2023 had to move from Oklahoma City to Northwest Arkansas to our headquarters, and then became director of operations of Mid-America. So it's kind of how I got here, but that's a little bit about me and I guess my story, what led me to here. But man, in the truck's fun, right?
That's awesome, man. What a trajectory you've been on.
Yeah, it's we were.
How old are you now?
32.
Nice.
So 32. Came here 26, 25, something like that.
When did you move to director of operations?
This year, so when I was 32. Yeah. So I was, like I said, I was in the truck full time, never ran service calls, never been a part of anything like this, bigger than mom and pop type situation. And then 19 became just operations manager, and then same year 19 regional manager, somewhere in 20 regional general manager, which was at that point over Phoenix and Austin and a couple of our new startups. And then did that for about 3.5 years. And then
man, you have, and I've never been part of a multi-state shop. Nate's never been part of a multi-state shop. I mean, we've been part of a big organization or an organization we were part of growing into a big organization. But we have a lot of people listening who are, technicians in the field and managers and even owners who are like, just dealing with the other 3 techs or dealing with my 4 employees or dealing with the customers that are right around the corner from my house is enough of a hassle. Like, how are you managing techs and clients in 3 states over, for crying out loud? That just sounds
availability. We just talked about I'm here in Phoenix. I had no intentions on being in Phoenix this week. I think Saturday it was like, you know what? I think I was actually supposed to be in Austin, Texas this week.
Well, you picked a good week because it's 108 and humid outside.
Feels wonderful. It feels wonderful.
It's glorious.
No doubt. But honestly, it's just, I think my ability, and I got to give some credit to my wife that allows me to go out and have a good support system at home and everything else that allows me to go out and do this type of different things. But honestly, just being able to be available, being able to go where's needed and where you can help out, right? I've always, somewhere it's quoted, I can't say it, but the way you kind of move forward in my eyes is find a problem, fix the problem. So that's what I look for, right? I look for problems, and then what can I do to solve them? So.
Well, there's no doubt accomplishing twice the amount of career wins as Brian has while you're only half of his age is something to be impressed about.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm imagining that, that trajectory and that journey has been filled with a fair amount of discomfort. And that's kind of the topic we're focusing on today. And so, when we talk about growth through discomfort, is that a personal motto for you or a career motto for you?
So, man, I'm somebody that I love to have conversations, love to talk. I just don't like to start the conversations or to meet the stranger. I do like to meet new people, but I have a hard time just essentially starting off that conversation.
Breaking the ice.
Yeah, breaking the ice. And so for me, it was that was my biggest fear when I started running calls, right? Was like, man, like I had to go inside this customer's home, knocking doors, and I got to be the conversation carrier.
No idea who's going to be behind door number one.
You
when
meet
it
all personalities throughout the day,
and you expect that everyone
is the worst,
10 times worse than the worst customer you ever met.
Absolutely, it's never as bad as what you think it is. No. But that's your mindset, almost, and I think that's almost never.
It's been once or twice.
Yeah. But that's just, I think, that anxiety that's kind of built up inside of you, and somehow you got to figure a way to combat it and use it to your strength, I guess, was my mindset. And when I started here and we went through our training, go ahead and give that plug to Mr. Aaron Hagan and Daryl Boyd to do some great training and gave me some topics to talk about and different ways to interact with the customer when I was inside the home, because I didn't really have those abilities. I knew I had my electrical abilities that I could always fall back on. So in my head, when I got nervous or you feel that butterflies inside your stomach, I had my skills to fall back on. Like I knew I could always
immediately revert to how much smarter you are than them at electrical.
I knew I had that.
You're not going to humiliate me by being a better talker. I'm just going to go back to electrical, and you can't reject me if I don't ask you to buy anything.
Calls at plumbers' houses. I mean, I'm telling you, those guys knew nothing. Just to start that off.
There it is. I love it.
Plumbers don't call electricians. We can turn our lights off ourselves.
I get it. Nonetheless, so I'll tell you, I remember my first call that I ran. I was as nervous as you could imagine, and I get out there. This customer has no power. I'll kind of tell you about breaking the ice, but the system is what I was going to follow, and that's how I was going to break the ice. I didn't have to worry about talking because I focused on the system, right? So if I could basically it was taking my nerves off of worrying about talking and just doing my job. And so my very first call that I had to run, give you guys a little quick backstory on this, is it was actually an ER call. I just got out of training. I was walking out of training. My manager at the time was like, "Hey, Dustin, you're taking ER this week. You feel like you can run your call?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." So no power in the living room. TV was out and whatnot. So I get there, go inside the home and do just follow the system. Because one thing I wasn't going to do is if I failed at this job, it wasn't going to be because of me. It was going to be because the systems in place didn't work. But obviously they worked. So nonetheless, I get inside the house. I'm talking to this guy, and I find out I can relate to him really well. I have some family members that are in truck driving all over the United States, and that's what this guy was. He was a truck driver. So I found some common ground that we could relate to and talk to, and not necessarily just focus straight on his problem, but I was able to kind of open up just by kind of getting there. So he's kind of a burly man and whatnot, and I walk in there for you electricians. He has Pushmatic panel, backstab devices, no GFIs in this house. Like it needs some dire need, if you could say the least. So that made me even more nervous because I knew I was about to write some good options, if you will. So go in there, kind of educate and relate. go out to my truck, build my options, and I'm coming back into the house here. And during one of our role plays, we always talk about, when you're talking about GFIs, we call them our airbag outlets, right? And, because what happens when you get into a head-on collision? Hopefully that airbag there deploys. And so I remember talking to him about that. I'm not going to lie, I felt really corny. I was I'm a trades guy who calls a GFI an airbag outlet nonetheless. But, followed the system, told the guy this, we'll go outside, build the options, coming back in, and I'm coming through the garage. And before I get to him, he's in the kitchen, he's on the phone, and I hear this dude talking to somebody on the phone, and he goes, yeah, man, he's like going to take care of this, and he's even going to get airbag outlets installed inside my home. And I, like, right then and there, like, I lost all anxiety, right? Like, I was like, man, just listening sometimes will take you a lot further than what you think. And so at that point, I was able to get in there, and that kind of helped me relieve some of that stress. But for me, just the
Did you find out what he thought an airbag outlet was going to look like?
Nah, don't ask questions you don't want the answer to. Like I said, he was already behind the airbag outlets. I don't care what he uses them for.
He's blowing up a little balloon and shoving it inside the outlet.
Yeah, he was waiting to prank his wife that night. But yeah, so I guess a lot of that was getting away. What I would say, Nate, Brian, is for me, it was not focusing so much on the anxiety of being nervous and more of just focusing on the task at hand. And if I could keep my mind off of it, then I didn't realize I was nervous, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. Either you've been doing it long enough where it's not an issue anymore, or you distract yourself until you get to that point.
Yeah, no, I mean, gosh, talk about, just sitting right here with you this first 5 minutes or whatever. Hopefully, Nate, you edit some of that out. But, I had the same feeling. I'm running my first call again here.
He was just running off at the mouth like, what are we going to talk about? Like,
yeah, I had
chill,
no idea.
Chill. Like, we've been sitting here talking for 10 minutes before we went live, and then he just fell apart as soon as I pressed the button.
Like that, all right?
Yeah. Oh, I'm editing all this out. Don't worry about a thing,
My
buddy.
man.
This will never see the light of day.
Yeah, well, no more questions.
Dustin, I mean, it sounds like a fair amount of your discomfort is based upon maybe a self-described introvert nature, or at least a lack of confidence in communication. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So, yeah, I can say one thing I usually don't lack is confidence, if anybody knows me. And it does, if there is a place in that, I guess it would be communication, but a lot of it's just the uncomfort of starting that conversation. So, and that's what I had to figure out. And I knew I could always do that. There's a way that I was taught, and we call it the form method. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard it, right? So when you need something to talk about, maybe other than what you're out there for, is, family, occupation, recreation, or material items. I'm a guy that, I'm just your typical Oklahoman, I guess you would say. I hunt, I fish, I lake it, whatever. So I would make sure when I walked inside those homes, I was looking around at different things, just being observant, looking at my surroundings, because I knew at some point I could bring some of that up. And then once I got talking, I didn't have a problem continuing that on, but it was kind of developing that skill. And when I walked into the home, just finding something I could relate to them, with whether that was if they had little kids around my age or my daughter's age, some my age.
You're not that young.
I was then. So, but being able to find something I could relate to and talk about was probably one of the biggest things for me, if I had to say that helped me really overcome that. And I've been out of the truck some time, I guess now, Nate, probably close to 4.5 years, something like that, since I've actually been in the truck. I still train. I still get in the truck from time to time. My guys that are listening to this, they're going to call me out on
what
that
truck?
One. What truck? But it's been a little longer, I guess, when I still look back there. But listening to your guys' podcast, actually, I remember I do a lot of travel, as we've talked about, and I remember Brian talking about one of his mentors, or a guy that you worked with. What was his name there? The guy that would always put you in a situation, whether when you guys were traveling or were at dinner.
Yeah, Lance Fernandez.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that. So I actually still use some of that same technique today. And, Brian talks about it when they were on an airplane, like, hey, from the flight attendant or whatever, like find something about their life, find out how many kids they have, find out
it wasn't
something.
It was like, find out if you grew up with both parents. And I'm like, what? It's always something super obscure where you're like, you can't naturally stumble into that conversation. I was talking about that with some of your texts earlier, where it was like, in the beginning, well, I'm walking over there to figure out how to talk my way into, it's like a bartender or something. The guy's sitting there trying to clean a glass or whatever with his little hand towel. And I'm like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, good. And he's, I'm like, back to this. And I'm like, so, you live around here? He's like, yeah, I live about 10 minutes away. And he's like, get back to work. And I'm trying to figure out, and it takes me forever, and my stomach's in knots. But then like, by the time he stopped doing that to me, I would just walk right up and go, hey, by chance, did you grow up with both parents? I had a stepdad. Cool. How many kids do you have? 2. All right. Thanks, man. Walk back over. It's like, here's the info. It's like, so what happened there? You started, at some point, I realized, like you realize more and more every time you do it, the people you're talking to are just as like nervous and anxious as you are. And whoever engages first wins. Like all the breaking of the ice lies on the least assertive person. I mean, so just walk right into it. Like, stop sticking your toe in the water before you get in the pool and just do a cannonball,
Dive full on. But that today still helps me. And if I could give advice to anybody out there, especially coming new into the trade, is, I don't know what episode that is, but go back, put yourself in some uncomfortable situations like that and just practice it. Brian and I was talking about this the other day, and I never really thought about it this way, but it's a learned skill, is something that Brian brought up, and it truly is. And after hearing your guys' podcast and me not really running calls and kind of continuing to work on that skill and be out there and having to continuously meet new people and do those different things, after hearing that episode, I continue to do it now, like in my everyday life. I make it a point when I'm traveling to talk to the flight attendants. When I go out and eat, I make it a point to talk to them and just get some sort of information out of them that I normally wouldn't, just because I think it's going to help you not only on your call, but it'll continue to help you develop down the road. But ultimately, I think our biggest problem is lack of communication when we're inside the home as a technician.
Sure. Lack of communication a lot of times just riddle me this. If you're walking in to give an estimate for some electrical work or HVAC or plumbing work or whatever, garage door or cleaning or whatever, and it is your mom's best friend who you've known almost your whole life, like, where's the ice that you have to break? It doesn't exist. And anyone they're not as uncomfortable as you would think they were if you did not know them. But if you can go at every person you meet like you've known them for years, that's the trick. That's the secret. Go at every person you talk to like you have known them for a decade, and get outside of yourself. So stop thinking about you.
That's honestly where it's at, right? Because who are you worried about?
Yeah, you're
worried about yourself. You're not worried about. You're not
worried about that person. Just put all your focus into that person. If you want to hear what he's talking about, that would be the keys to relationship building with my man Jeremy Pruitt from Halloween of 2022. So 10/31/22 is the episode. The intro to that episode, we dig into it a little, and I tell the most humiliating time that my old mentor had me do it. It just humiliated me.
And with those tactics, like what I would say is definitely before everything, I think as human beings, we revert to the negative or the worst case scenario or the worst case possible. So if you can realize that we do that, so when you go in there and you think you're about to go talk to this customer, we automatically think about the worst client that we've ever been to, not the best client that we've ever been to. If you can change it to, hey, this is going to be better than my best client than I've ever been to, I realized that would also help me kind of alleviate some of that anxiety before I even got in there, because it was kind of like seeing myself win before I even stepped through the door, right? Didn't necessarily have to worry about that. And even talking about stepping out of your comfort zone, like he's talking about, things that I would do is start with small things. You ain't got to go crazy. You ain't got to just walk up on your first time like you talked about and just, hey, how many kids you got? Where do they live?
Yeah. Well, you'll get to the point where you do it if you're forcing yourself to get a couple pieces of information from everyone you see for a while. You'll get to the point where you understand nobody's going to shoot you for whatever that anxiety is that you think is going to happen. It never happens. So you just get to the point where you're like completely numb and you can just walk up and ask anyone anything.
And the biggest thing is a lot of it, if you will start the conversation, is what I've learned, they will carry the conversation.
Yeah, especially if you're doing what we were doing, which I didn't realize at the time, which he was making me get people to talk about themselves. And everybody loves to do that.
Everybody loves to talk about themselves. And in the service world, like some active listening is huge. Because when you're sitting there and that customer, and I mean, like I said, everybody likes to talk about themselves, and they're going to tell you so much. They're going to tell you, you know, their high points, their low points. They're going to, what piques their interest. Is it electronics? Is it this? Is it that? They will carry the conversation. You don't have to. You just got to go in there and be the icebreaker, if you will, on that. But like I say, I think if you can stay focused on the listening part and what they're actually saying, the rest kind of comes along with it.
So, Dustin, I mean, it sounds to me like, you know, you've progressed your way through some uncomfortable situations. And I'm sure there's many listeners who can relate, whether it's communication or learning a certain aspect of the trade or overcoming their first objection or dealing with a difficult client, whatever it may be. Are you more in favor of the approach where you force yourself into uncomfortable situations so that you have to deal with it? Or are you more a fan of like preparing as best you can, and then when the uncomfortable situation happens, you're ready for it and you roll with the punches? Which has worked best for you?
I don't know if preparing for it was necessarily what I would go into. I would just go in with the mindset. For me, it was a lot of mindset situation that it's gonna be okay, and find ways around that to be okay with the objection or whatever, to get back into that, and understanding that an objection is just going to turn into a conversation at this point. And as long as you can continue to ask as the professional inside the home, if you ask open-ended questions, usually the conversation doesn't end. So I can keep rolling, keep the things going, but I think just knowing, open-ended questions is a great answer. And like I said, let them talk. They're going to tell you a lot of things on that.
Now that you're more of a regional person and you're getting around the country, you're seeing different technicians and in different locations, and you're perhaps getting a bit more perspective. Would you say that many of the things that we feel uncomfortable about, as tradespeople or even just as, men and women, would you say that you're finding more commonality in what people across the country are finding uncomfortable? Or do you find that, people in Phoenix have different discomforts than people in Oklahoma City, than people in Tulsa? What has that been like now that you're getting around and gaining some perspective?
I think that for me, just from, traveling, I guess, across 6 different states that we cover, it all falls up on the technician's skills or their abilities, what they're comfortable with. So if I'm only comfortable with surge and smokes, I'm only going to want to talk about surge and smokes. And so to me, it goes a lot of difference from tech to tech to tech. So the best advice that I can give somebody to help with the uncomfortable different things like that out would be learn your role plays. To me, role plays are massive, and they will lead you to be able to talk about, we have a top 10 list is what we call it, and it's just our top 10 life safety items. And we have a role play for those. They're not long, not too hard, but what I noticed more than anything is guys will learn 2 or 3 of those top 10 role plays, and that's where they really seem to focus. And we know it by the numbers that we track and the routes that we go down. But if I could give any advice, is learn your role plays for somebody that, like me, that is an electrician and is confident with their skills but doesn't necessarily know how to make it relatable to the customer. Is focus on those role plays, stick to those role plays, practice with those role plays, and put yourself in uncomfortable situations. And what I mean by that is man, go do it in front of your peers. Go step up in front of your entire team and start role playing. It's not going to be any more uncomfortable. That's probably the most uncomfortable moment you'll have is on the role play type situation, is doing it in front of your entire team. And if you can perfect it in front of those guys that know exactly what you're talking about, a group of electricians, a group of plumbers, a group of HVAC, whatever it may be out there, if you can do it in front of your team and they know when you mess up, you realize when you're out there with a customer and they don't know, really anything at all, it's smooth as can be. So to me, it's perfect practice makes perfect, right? So, or
Vince Lombardi.
Yeah.
Practice doesn't make perfect.
Perfect practice makes perfect. Yeah. So it's repetition at that point. And that was honestly for me, Nate, was just to get myself out of the comfort zone, was learning my systems. And that was my way of turning, because once I had success, the system made me have success, understanding my role plays, different things like that. And once I got that stuff down, then I could not have the anxiety so much as being nervous of running calls or presenting options or talking about, arc faults, breakers, panels, whatever we may be talking about, because it turned to confidence from, nervousness, I guess you would say.
It seems to me, Dustin, that in today's world, there is maybe this is revealing a little bit of my perspective on things, but there's a shyness to do hard things. There's a welcoming of comfort, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you don't have to push yourself, the helicopter moms and the participation trophies and all this stuff, where we've bubble wrapped so many things in the culture. And so it's quite feasible that somebody goes through their up and coming years and doesn't really have to overcome challenges. Like, they're never really faced with a significant issue, like, and the Wi-Fi going out doesn't count. Like that's not what I mean. I'm talking about real levels of discomfort, real pull yourself up by the bootstraps moments. And so, like, I don't know if you agree with that or not, but as you reflect upon kind of where the up and coming generation is, or even, the technicians that you train or see on a weekly basis, what is it that you encourage them to do in terms of, like, get out there and do hard things, like stop waiting for somebody to come along and just give things to you, get out there and do it because it's worth it. How do you bring that perspective to the table?
Man, everything you said is 100% true, and I wouldn't admit that if Brian would have said that, but no, you're exactly right, and it's very hard, and it's honestly they have a run mentality, right? When things get tough, might as well run. What they don't realize is it's much easier just to buckle down, learn where you're at. You're already there. The grass ain't always greener on the other side, and go get it. But man, that's you put it in pretty good perspective. Is right now I feel like
almost like it was getting cathartic there for a second, right?
Yeah,
like Nate was getting some was on the therapist couch.
Yeah.
Did you lose your Wi-Fi today, buddy?
I wasn't exactly sure where we were going.
I know that'd be the end of your world. Yeah, for sure. It all comes from a good place, right? I mean, this search for comfort, this need to coddle and baby our kids. And
gosh, the internet. I feel like everybody can hide behind a keyboard these days. Everybody, can do it from there versus actually having to be out there in the real world and actually having to grab that hammer, hit that staple. Like, I have social media, of course. I think most of us do out there, but I'm not a guy that posts on it or does a bunch of different things, but I think I see a lot of people a lot of times and they hide behind it. And, on the internet, you can be anybody you want to. You can act as hard as you want to. You can be the hardest worker, but at the end of the day, it's not getting done, but everybody thinks it's all right. So I think what that has done for us and, the generation coming up is they care more about perception than reality. And reality is it's not going to be given to you, and you got to go out there and get it. And you got to get out there and earn it. Because if it's handed to you, it's not going to be what it would be if it was earned.
There's still hope, though. I mean, you've seen now with the years you've been in this, Nate and I have certainly seen someone from the, let's just say it, millennial generation. It's your generation. It's yours too, Nate. But someone pretty soft and babied and never really known a hard day and never really had to struggle through anything, come in and actually get it. And get to the other side of that and find a couple wins through hard work and go, you know what? I like this. Like there's no better feeling on earth. There's no comfortable feeling of any kind that even scratches the surface on the feeling of a job well done, a hard fought win. And when people get a taste of that, that becomes addictive.
You're 100% right, and some of that's just, I think, competition that's bred into
So
some
comes
people.
the Oklahoma City in them.
That's the Arkansas location I got to work at. Sorry,
Taking shots at the boss now, huh?
No. Yeah, it's hard, man, and the wins is what will get you there. But to get to the wins, you got to put in the work. The wins don't just happen overnight. They're probably not going to happen on your first call or, systems, different things like that. It does take a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of, just grit sometimes. You got to be okay with losing every now and again, even though it sucks. Love the movie Moneyball, right? And he talks about I hate losing more than I like winning. And I think that's one of the coolest statements ever. And it sucks to get knocked down, but as long as you continue to get back up, eventually you'll be there at the end of it.
So Dustin, there's one of a great movie that's out there, Saving Private Ryan. It's a classic war film by Steven Spielberg, depicting the events surrounding D-Day and the invasion on Normandy. And there's a fictional character, who a bunch of guys are going to rescue and all that. But part of it that stands out to me is one of the characters is a fairly young soldier, and during one of the critical battles, his task, his unit is basically pinned down, and they're about to get surrounded by the German army, and his task is to run around and resupply ammunition to the troops who are stationed, in buildings and around corners and all kinds of places. And so he's doing this, and everybody's getting shot up, and he's getting called. I need ammo over here, so he runs over there and drops some. I need ammo over here, so he runs over there and drops some. And there's this one scene that's just brutal to watch because, he's going up to help one of his guys and give him some ammo, and an enemy soldier has already found that guy, and they're in this crazy fight, like a physical fight, choking each other and everything. And he's a young soldier, and he has the opportunity to go in there and help him, but fear overcomes him, and he's just gripped by fear, and he just sits there in the other room listening to this gruesome battle go on as his compatriot gets killed. And then the enemy soldier walks right by him, looks at him, and stares at him, and he can't even move. And it just speaks to the regret that if we choose not to do hard things, and if we all whether it's fear-based or whether it's laziness or cowardice or whatever, there's an element of regret that comes with that. And there's an element of victory and confidence that comes with it when we choose to do the hard things. So can you speak to a time in your life when you were faced up against, maybe not a life or death situation, but when you're faced up against something that was hard and that you chose to move forward with it, and you felt the victory from it? Or if you want to be humble and honest, you can choose a different example where you chose not to do something and you've regretted it. Speak to us about a story from your past.
Wow. Okay. So I would say I don't really shy away from challenges, especially if you know people around me or what we do. So it's kind of part of the reason Brian texted me last night, you want to be on a podcast? Yeah, I knew it was going to be a challenge, but I'm not going to shy away from it.
And I was pretty sure it was going to be a yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to shy away from it, even though it's going to be challenging. Nonetheless, there was a time I guess in my early career that I went and I worked in North Dakota, Minot, North Dakota. It's a wonderful place. If you ever get a chance to visit, don't. Wonderful place. I went up there and was doing some electrical on some of the drilling rigs and doing different things like that. And man, I just turned 21 when I went, I guess you could say, Nate. And dude, I was single. I was making really great money at the time up there. Really good money. And, you see that stuff and oil field comes and goes and starts to slow down. And, the writing on the wall was that money wasn't going to be there the whole time. And, what does every 21-year-old do that starts to make money? They blow their money, had a good time with it. But nonetheless, when I had to, I guess where I came to the biggest challenge was I had to find a way when I came back from that place in North Dakota and from making really good money and doing different thing. And I went back to new construction, which is what I know. So I cut my salary into about a quarter of what it was. And, at that point in time, there was a crossroads in my life, because I seen the part where I could have went and jumped back into oil field, maybe not even doing electrical, but I could have got back on that money, and I would have had to got back on the road and kind of just leave home again and just be chasing that. But I guess where it got hard is staying there and grinding it out for, $19 an hour, and just, went from having whatever I wanted, I guess you could say, at that age, to some pretty humble pie, having roommates, crappy couches.
At $19 an hour? My early plumbing career was $7.
Yeah, but when you're 49 years old, like, the dollar went further back then, all right?
I daydreamed about $19 an hour between two of us.
No. Like I said, I lived a pretty good life for a couple of years up there, all right? But honestly, like I said, I had a great childhood. I had great parents. I didn't have, really a bad upbringing by no means. My dad's a guy that just freaking grinded it out. I think that's where I got my work ethic from, was my dad. And so I can't say anything like, tough times like that. But it was just the choice do I run from what I know will be success for, obviously a lifelong career that I can make something out of myself and continue to grow, or do I chase what was right in front of me and go back to, making some oil field money? And so I just stayed there and kind of grinded it out for a couple years. And then, like I said, really everything kind of switched gears for me when I finally decided to make the leap and went to Mr. Sparky, and then got back on that money train. But I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking there for, Nate. But yeah, I don't have just a tough, crazy roadblock time. Like I said, I had some great parents and a great upbringing, to be honest. So, but yeah, and I'm a guy that's not going to rely on, it didn't matter what was happening. I wasn't going to be somebody that relied on, my parents or whoever to bail me out. Like, my way was, I was never going to, it's burn the bridges type of things, right? I moved out at 18 and I wasn't going back. So whatever I had to do, whatever that meant, was that, but that was just my mindset. So, but as far as just crazy tough times like you just talked about and saving Private Ryan, not quite as gnarly as his, I would say.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, it sounds to me like your life has been full of quite a bit of, I'm going to choose the hard things anyways. And I think that when we choose hard things and we do it continuously, that habit is a lot easier to follow the next time a hard thing comes around. And the inverse of that is also true. When we choose to accept excuses, when we choose to shy away from hard things, when we choose comfort, and that becomes our MO, it's also easy to really follow in that pathway. And so, I feel like anybody can fall into a habit or a routine of just accepting less than and becoming complacent or content, or just, I don't need to push it as hard as I used to, or I don't need to go out as hard as I have in the past. And we kind of come up with all these rationalizations about whether it's how old I've gotten or something that's changed in my life or or something that's going on outside of work right now. And we come up with these rationalizations to say, oh, okay, for all these reasons, I don't have to push myself as hard as I used to. I don't have to do these hard things. And while there are times and seasons when that may be true, a lot of times it's a bunch of BS. And if we don't recognize that and call it out in ourselves and say, hang on, when's the last time that I actually did challenge myself? When's the last time that I actually did choose to do something hard? That's when we start to see that atrophy. And so much of this episode is focused around growth through the discomfort. I mean, the opposite of that is atrophy through laziness. And atrophy is, the breaking down of your muscles that just basically become, fat over time because you're no longer putting them in areas of discomfort. You're no longer putting them through hard things. And so what do? They break down, they atrophy, they grow weak. But it's the constant decision to say, I'm going to choose hard things that creates the growth. And through that, when a seed is planted in the ground, the seed has to die for growth to occur. The seed has to die when it is put in the ground for growth to occur. And when that happens, even though it's a hard thing, you see the benefit of the seed finally turning into that plant.
Yeah, I'm just to follow you up there. I always quote Batman Dark Knight. The night is always darkest just before the dawn. And it's kind of exactly what you're talking about there. And I would want to touch back on the no excuses thing. If you would talk to my ops team right now and management in there, and that's one thing that I go in every single week when we do an operations meeting. The one thing that I talk about them is we're going to, we'll handle any kind of issues, anything I can do, but don't come to me with excuses. I am doing a no excuse policy. There's always a solution. There's always an answer. There's always a way out. Don't come to me with why we can't do it. Come to me with why we can, or how can we, and let's figure that out together type of situation. But it's funny that you say that because we are I'm trying to, and they're great. Like, I think I have literally the best ops team in the country, and I'm sure every other manager would say the same thing about their shop. But these guys truly set out there and grind it out, and make my job a lot easier because they start implementing the no excuse policy that I put them. And I just came in. I think it was actually after a Goggins book or a Goggins podcast that he was talking about. Somebody I listened to a ton of is David Goggins, and it's just, I love his stay hard, right? Like the don't show no weakness, there won't be no weakness type situation. And not to put a plug on somebody else while we're here doing this Waste No Day, but
you're never going to hear us complain about plugging one of those guys.
Goggins is somebody that I listen a lot to just on mindset. Now I know he's a little bit extreme, but just his mindset's phenomenal, and I try to take that and instill that. Whether that was in myself when I was just out there running calls, is don't come with excuses. If you didn't sell the call, in every what I hear most is, man, it was that crap customer or whatever it was. Like, before you say it was that crap customer, let's figure out what you could have done first. Did you run your call to the 100% potential? Did you run it to the best of your abilities? Did you try to overcome that objection? And
sometimes you can think, yes, like I did everything I could do there. The
reality is you probably did.
No, and what I always found to be the most effective way to get outside of it and see it from a different perspective is to look at it from a different perspective. So say, is there anyone I know that I think could have sold that call? And I did that with my old mentor, Lance, where I would go, yeah, he would have sold it. No matter what. The answer, I would always just say, yes, he would have figured it out. How? And then replay in your head what so-and-so would have done to actually sell that call, and then try that next time.
And it's usually not a negative conversation, because once I ask them, hey, did you run it to 100%? Is there any part that you missed on, whatever? Usually you can have a realistic conversation, and the guys they notice enough, like, yeah, no, I probably could have been better here. But it goes back to our comfort thing, that why weren't they better there is because they're not comfortable in that position, right? They didn't either set the expectation, they weren't comfortable with their, going over their safety inspection, or weren't comfortable with their role plays, so they didn't do it. So, you miss out on those things.
Nerves took over.
Yeah.
Anxiety overcame you,
And once you can get some vulnerability and understand, like, hey, we're all uncomfortable. None of us go in there not nervous. I go run a call right now, and I'd be just as nervous probably as my first call, right? But I'd have the confidence is the difference, but I'd still be just as nervous. And but once you talk through that and we can start training through that, it's pretty big. But I think the biggest takeaway was just with myself in my own mind was to stay away from the excuses, because it's very easy to go in there and blame it on the customer or blame it on a bad call or blame it on a non-opportunity, when I probably personally myself could have done more on that call to convert it or make that home safer or whatever it may be. And so I just kind of took that up the ladder with me as I continued to, throughout my career. And now I do the same thing with my ops managers is don't come to me with excuses. Let's figure out solutions. Let's give these guys a way to win. Like, that's what we do a lot. Like, make sure when we're coaching to win, not coaching to coddle, if you will. And then as they do that through their technicians in the shop, and you start getting that culture of winning culture, and just a winning culture, no excuse culture, and man, it becomes a winning culture.
So Dustin, let's say that somebody's listening to this episode, and they're having one of those moments where this is just resonating with them, and they're saying, you know what, I have been shying away from hard things. I have fallen into a pattern of comfort. I have been accepting less than for far too long, and I'm afraid I don't know how to break out of it because it's become habitual at this point. It's become kind of like what I do. What would you say to that person to help them break through this acceptance of comfort? And like, all right, the next time this happens, here's what you got to do to force yourself into that place of doing hard things and that place of growth. Because when, like we talked about before, when you're in that habit of doing things, it's just so easy to continue accepting the less thans and choosing comfort and shying away from difficult things. So what would you do to encourage them or to break them out of that habit and get them back to a place of growth?
So I think there's a couple words you touched on there is habits. You've obviously made a habit of making up excuses, so that's a learned lesson. Might not have been a good lesson, but you can also get out of the habit by teaching yourself out of it. And I think consistency, and some of that's just, put something on your dash, no excuses, whatever it may be, put something on your dash before you go in there, running out of the locker room, hitting that top thing before you walk in this house, no excuses, right? And it's just something that you got to do consistent. So I would say get consistent with it and have some self-awareness that maybe you are giving yourself excuses, and, just be honest with yourself, honestly, Nate.
So as we're wrapping things up here, Dustin, this has been really good conversation, and I want to ask you one more vulnerable question here. Obviously you've overcome some challenges in your own life. You've broken out of some introvert tendencies. You've strengthened your communication. Obviously you're doing well because you've risen through the ranks and become a coach to other people. What is something that you struggle with right now in terms of choosing the discomfort, choosing the hard thing? What is something that you're still trying to overcome today?
So since my director of operations role came on this year, what I would say is just making sure that I bring good content to our meetings, making sure that our meetings are not boring. Like, that's what gives me anxiety right now is, when I have an operations meeting every Wednesday, there's a lot of build up. Like, man, are these guys going to take away from this? Is there something they're going to be able to walk out of here with
Gino's in the second row falling asleep on you.
Dude. Yeah, I call him out in that meeting. No, I'll call him out.
Gino's been swinging a pickaxe for a few days.
Hey, dude, he's putting in 42K right now.
Yeah,
give my man Gino some.
But I still gotta give him a little crap. Love you, buddy.
Yeah, give my man. He's sleeping. He ain't listening right now. Okay, dude. No, give my man Gino a break. He's putting in 42K, and it's going in the ground. So, in here in Arizona, it does take a pickaxe. But no, that anxiety's back again. You got to go prep for that meeting. You're leading at this point other leaders right now, and I just don't want to waste their time. They're busy during the day. They're fielding phone calls. I ask them to put their phone on focus mode, whatever it may be. And so I have that anxiety of leaving them leaving that meeting like this is a pointless meeting. You know what I mean? So That's where it is right now with me, I say, and where I'm getting better at is focusing on learning to lead meetings. I have the content, I have stuff I want to talk about, but just to make sure it's interactive and it's fun and they actually take something away from it, Nate.
Yeah, I can certainly sympathize with that. If you ever move into a role of leadership or into a role of training, content creation is so critical, and you cannot just roll over a meeting. You can't just coast, because you do that and all of a sudden people realize well, you didn't put the effort in, so I'm not going to put the effort in. And so you got to bring it, and bringing it is it's not easy, and you know that. Yeah,
and it's quick. You can tell when you lose somebody, and you try to get them re-engaged, but man, you've lost them. Better luck next week, type situation. So
yeah, no, at the end of the day, they just deserve better than that.
Yeah,
like you said it earlier. They make our jobs not even easier, possible.
Yeah.
Because if there's only 4 people working at the company, there's nobody in the office.
Ain't no need for me.
Right. So the least we can do is stay up after the wife and kids go to bed and put a little blood, sweat, and tears into the meeting for the hour that we might have them the next morning. It's for me, that's just the absolute least I can do for the team that's out there freaking swinging pickaxes in 110 degrees with some humidity. Ugh.
And you were worried about walking to the door. You had to make sure I was in here.
I was pissed. I was like, "You better open his door. I'm not stepping out of this car."
He wouldn't get there. He goes, "Are you inside?" I'm not getting out of the car.
Looking
it's
in
too
the window
before I come to the
door's
door.
Not here. Cracked. I want the air conditioning to hit me 5 feet from the door.
No, absolutely. That's a plumber for you, though.
Well, this has been great stuff today, Dustin. It's always good to have a challenge for all of our listeners, including myself, in terms of choosing to do the hard things and growing through discomfort. If people are really resonating with what you're talking about today and they're interested in finding you or learning more about what you're all about, where's a great place to do
that? So my email is D as in Dustin, Seaton, Seaton, at sparkyelite.com. That's really about it. I don't have no big social media platform or worldwide podcast we got going on here.
Darn right. Award-winning worldwide podcast.
Well, good stuff, Dustin. And as we wrap up here, last question for you is: I'm sure you've done a fair amount of reading or listening to resources around doing hard things. You already mentioned Goggins. Besides David, are there other books that you would recommend to somebody who's maybe feeling a little more lackluster in terms of their pursuit of growth, or
Jocko.
Somebody who feels like they've fallen into that habit? Who would you recommend?
Right. I mean, I'm a huge Jocko fan. The Dichotomy of the Jocko. So I'm a huge fan of Dichotomy of Leadership. I think that was his second book. The first one was Extreme Ownership. And then his second book was The Dichotomy of Leadership. I probably listened to that thing a few times. And it's a great book because it's broke out in chapters. If you just read it from beginning to end, it's 15 hours, so it's impossible. But it's broke down in 45-minute chapters, and such a freaking good book, man.
Good stuff. Well, our guest today has been Dustin Seaton. It's been great to have you on, man. We really appreciate you being vocal and honest about this particular subject. Like I said, it is something that we all need to be challenged in, and you've done a great job at laying that down for us today. So thanks so much for sharing with us.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, buddy. I'm looking forward to, as most guests I tell that I enjoy an interview with, looking forward to having you on again.
Hey, that's a wrap for this podcast. We hope that you enjoyed your time with Dustin Seaton. Like I said, it's always great to have somebody who's kind of making you feel a little bit uncomfortable about what you're doing and whether it's enough. And so appreciate the challenge there, and I hope you as a listener have done that as well. If you're interested, make sure that you reach out to him. He provided his email address, and I'm sure he'd be happy to help. And of course, we're always looking for great guests. So if you have other subjects or ideas about who you'd like to hear on the podcast, let us know. Hit us up in the comments, leave us a review. We'd sure appreciate that. Right now, though, we're going to leave you with our weekly challenge, which lines up very nicely with the subject of today's podcast: to choose to wake up every single morning and waste no day.